Chase, you start up and just introduce yourself, welcome everybody to here, and then what grade you're in, and then Araya will introduce herself, what grade, and then we have a special guest, and then he can, and Nainoa can just share a little bit about himself, and then you can go into the, what does it mean to be a manager?
No, you're quick.
No, to see who's gonna introduce. Okay.
Oh, yeah. You got it, bud.
Oh wait, do you want our papers to be?
No, just look right ahead.
Okay.
You know your name, and you know what school you're at, and you know what grade you're in.
Wait, we're saying our school?
Wait, we're saying our school?
Yeah. Your name is. Oh.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Chase.
Okay.
Chase.
Yeah, just like that. That was perfect.
Chase Konishi, 7th grade.
Yep.
Okay. Hi, I'm Chase Konishi in 7th grade.
And I'm Araya Bonifacio Faleo, and I'm in 8th grade at Kamaki Middle School.
We're very thankful to have a special guest, Mr. Nainoa Thompson.
Thank you. Well, my name is Nainoa Thompson, and I'm still in school too. But my school is a canoe in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and where we're constantly learning about the Earth. And I guess I'm so sorry, but I'm going to bore you guys to death. If you fall asleep, it's fine. I was asked to do an introduction about who am I? That's a complicated question. But before I do that, I do want to thank the 200 participants and the vast majority that made the trip to Hawaii to be here in person to talk about. But my understanding and is that the belief that engagement with communities, belief with engagement with place is core to the future of education. And so inherently, my understanding is that there is a question about, does the education need to change? So who are the navigators for that? I think it's the participants within this conference, because the school I'm in is not in the walls of the institutions. I'm not saying the institutions are important, but my school is out there in the world of nature, primarily on the ocean. So I'm an advocate for your work. I believe in it. I fully believe that the greatest determinant of what our future is going to be is what we teach our children. So I do think about questions like, as the world changes at a pace that's never changed before, the world moves with systems of connections to anywhere on the earth with anybody, anytime. The ability for us to be able to move forward in an innovative way, but also reminding ourselves about the importance of our balance with nature and the earth. So I'm honored to be here. I was asked to tell you who I am. I'm Keiki Aina. I'm from this land. My mom and my dad's genealogies come from the background of being Native Hawaiian, and I've been raised in a Hawaiian family, but in a different time, and it was a complex time. To understand who I am, you need to understand my grandparents, especially my father's mother, who, when I was a young child, she lived in a small wooden house in a valley over where I lived. It's called Kuli'o'o, and she had a living room, and she had a couch. It's called a pune'e. People believe that she was clairvoyant, and that her looking into the future would be on this couch where she would meditate, and where she would think, and where she would dream. But she was a teacher, and profoundly impacted me as a child. So we would sit in the living room, my older brother and sister and myself, and she would tell us stories about her grandfather, who was a prideful man that was well respected as a fisherman. And you know where like Port La Point is, in that place called Kaiwi Coast? They named the coast for the white of the bone of the wave because it's so rough there. But he would pick her up when she was a child and paddle around at night in the rough oceans and take her into where he lived in a place called Allen Davis. And when she talked about sitting on that couch and talking about her grandfather. You could see, it wasn't, I don't remember her words, but I remember her eyes. That when she talked about her grandfather as being Hawaiian and skilled in the oceans, and the love that she had and the pride she had for him. She talked about my grandfather. Her whole body would sit up, and it would sit up on this couch, and it was like strength of pride that lifted her, and she looked at you right in the eye and said, and was essentially telling you, you should be proud of who you are because of where you come from. But she had this amazing ability to change the story. And she would talk about her uncle who would take the powerful detergent called lye and try to rub the brown off his skin. She would talk about her time that she learned Hawaiian as first language. English was the second language. And she was taught culture and hula and dance beautifully. But what happened when you go back and take an eye blink, that 2,000 years ago, the first canoe came to Hawaii. And these people learned how to live within the limits of the island. And they learned how to adapt and innovate in terms of a changing world. They learned how to protect nature because it would protect them. So they were geniuses in land tenure. They were genius in protection of fresh water. They were genius in building fish ponds and managing natural resources. Otherwise, Hawaiians wouldn't be here. So that's a 2,000-year school, these islands. And the problem is we forgot. And so sitting with my grandmother, she would talk about the other half of her, this civil war inside of her about Captain Cook comes, and then it would be 28 years later that 75% of Native Hawaiians had passed away, introduced diseases. It was a terrible time. And that was over 250 years ago. 100 years ago, the population would be down to about 22,000, so only about 1 out of 37 survived. In 1926, the public school system would outlaw Hawaiian language and culture, the things that you enjoy today, because it had no value in the changing world. They outlawed it by policy, and they changed education. And what it did was it created the detergent of lie kind of wiping off being proud of who you are, and left you homeless in terms of your soul as a people. So when we start to look at the issues, the challenges that Native Hawaiians are dealing with, it's easy to see that when you took everything away about who they were, you left them in a place with emptiness. And so my father would be born in 1924. He'd be the first generation in 100 years that would not be taught Hawaiian language and culture and traditions and genealogy. So we broke the record of who we were as a people, and by not teaching them. So he wouldn't be able to carry on those stories. So here I am born into that father, where I would go to school, and for my 13 years of powerful education, there would be essentially nothing on anything Hawaiian. So I had no idea who I am because I don't know where I came from. I don't know who my ancestors are, and I don't know how we got here. That canoe on the wall came from a place called Kaikinui, 2,500 miles away in the South Pacific.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know I came from the genealogy of the greatest explorers on the oceans and navigators of all time, because it wasn't worth teaching. So I graduated from high school not knowing anything. And when I say I'm a student, I am, because I'm a student of just great teachers. It would be 2 years after high school, kind of wandering around, not knowing not knowing so much. I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't believe I was good enough to do it because I was Hawaiian. And so success was not in your future. And so there was this man, he was a dreamer, he was a painter, he was Hawaiian. His name was Herb Kawainui Kane. And it's a long story, but I was paddling in our canoes, our 6-man paddling canoes for a canoe club called Huinalo. He had a dream, but he wouldn't speak to it to the society because people wouldn't understand, because it was all about restoring and recovering our traditions where people felt they had no value. And so he kept it quiet, but what he was doing was he was going to build a voyaging canoe that we had no idea what it was about. He was going to recruit the top watermen in Hawaii. The Kanu'la'ais, the 2 top head coaches, were high on the list of the top water people in Hawaii. I was like a novice banana paddler, and but he had these 2 small fiberglass canoes that he lashed together and put a little sail on it. He borrowed a Hobie Cat sail from somebody, and he needed someone to paddle him out the reef to get outside so he could sail around. So he would come to the canoe club. I wanted to learn how to sail something, so I paddled him as far as I could every day. And so, so he invites me to a dinner with these 2 top water guys, and he was recruiting them, not me. I think he just felt he should just help feed me for one night just to thank me for paddling him around. But that night changed my life.
Do you remember the 2's names?
Yes. One is Billy Mitchell, top Molokai Tolau champion. The other one's name is Kalaa Kukea. And I would say next to Eddie would be the top waterman in Hawaii's history.
Oh, wow.
This guy was, he was everything. He's an ocean engineer, so he knew the science of the sea. He was a champion paddler. He was a champion surfer. He opened his own engineering company. He was an ocean engineer, and he did all the kind of field work that other ocean engineers companies couldn't do because they weren't good enough in the water, in our rough waters. So I worked for him as a diver, and so I go to this room, old wooden room across the stream from where we paddled, and Billy and Kalaa were there, and they were talking to them, not to me, and I was just listening. I walk in the door. Like that. There was 19 oil paintings. Herb Kane was an artist. He was a sculptor. He was a painter. But he was a researcher, and he was an author. He wrote books on voyaging. And so on the wall was these oil paintings of 19 deep-sea voyaging canoes that I had no connection to. Whether it was New Zealand, whether it was Tahiti, whether it was Rapa Nui, that represented the vastness of the Pacific Islands. And so I was learning fast about something that was empty in me, but it's starting to get filled. And so then he had all these nautical charts like this, where they're like big ones about places like Cook Islands or Tonga and Samoa. These are places of our family that I had no idea, no connection. And then and all these nautical charts of places that I'd never, ever even heard the name for it. That's how complete the education was to wash out what we used to know. And so we sat down at dinner, and he starts to quietly talk about the dream, build a voyaging canoe. Damn. And then sail it to your ancestral homeland. And then that's where I was just intrigued. And without understanding it, everything started to come together about wanting to be proud of who I am. But I got to know what it is. And my love for the ocean and the challenge of having your life maybe have a chance to do something greater than yourself and better than what you could do by yourself, a voyaging canoe. But what changed my whole life was, it's pretty emotional, because it would be 50 years ago this year, 1973. That was at dinner. And he took us outside into the yard. And he took our eyes and made them focus on these 7,000 dots of light, of chaos. called the cosmos,
Mm.
and to look at the star. And then he made a story, a Hawaiian story, that took you to Nahiku, which is the Greeks called, it's called the Big Dipper. And from there he went to Hokopa, the North Star. Then he started connecting from the Northern Star through these two powerful stars. One is called Hokulea, one is called Hikeanulea. That's Arcturus and Spica, the Greek names. So he was meshing genealogies of other places, Arabic, Greek, then ultimately Micronesian. And then he would take us to these four stars that would sit on these other four stars, which is called the Southern Cross. Hanai Akamalama, to be cared for by the moon. These are all these puzzles of names of these powerful stars that none of us knew nothing. But that evening, I never forgot that line across the heavens. I never forgot that. My life changed, and then there was a tiny chance that you could do something with your life. You could do something much greater than you could even imagine if you followed something that you believed in. And what Herb gave to us was dreams, but he gave us beliefs. And that's my journey. That's who I am. And so I've been on this journey of learning and the issue of transformation, the issue of its impact. What you learn in today about your place, I understand you're planting 50 ulu trees right now.
Mm-hmm.
How many schools do that? What if every school in the world planted 50 ulu trees and then remained and dealt with the issues, climate change, and said, we're just going to protect the chemistry of the atmosphere by putting more oxygen into it to deal with the offset of carbon? What if we did that? What if every school, Kaimiki Middle School, just challenges in a kind way every school in the world? On your campus, use your campus to save the balance of the earth, our atmosphere, and our oceans for the betterment of humanity. What if we did that?
That'd be crazy.
Yeah.
Be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's me.
Yeah.
A little bit for Hokulea, the first trips. I know this is another life story, but Hokulea and
Yeah. So I just followed these extraordinary mentors. They all became mentors. And if one thing I know the power of the teacher, because they took me by the hand like a child and pulled me into a different window, the old window. And they were courageous. Think about that. You're going to use these stars to find an island 2,500 miles away, and you don't know how to do it. And so, but they were courageous because they believed, we don't know how to do it, but the dream is the right one, and we need to follow it, but we need to go learn. So there's a whole 1,000 steps of learning. And so when I say I'm still in school, I am. But the big pinnacle moments would be when Kalakukea picked me up with his old beat-up red truck. We drove to Honolulu Harbor, Pier 39, in an abandoned pineapple storage place on Honolulu Harbor with old rusted corrugated iron roofing, and it leaked water. And when you go inside, and then he picked me up, he took me inside, and I looked inside the warehouse, and it's like oil-soaked cement, just layers and layers of decades of oil from trucks and so forth in there. But there were these pieces of wood on the ground. There were a bulkhead or a strong back or a gunnel. I didn't know what they were. They were the pieces of Hokulea laying on the oil-soaked cement. And our job was just to sand it and paint it. But you put your hand into something that would become sacred. And then Herb Connie kept his promise. Many people make promises, not always fulfill them. Herb did. March 8th, it's an important day. It's Hokulea's birthday, 1975. He launched that canoe. Then he gave the canoe to us.
Oh wow.
He gave us the tool to go find who we are by actually going down the sea roads. 1975 was, it was that, we launched it on a Saturday. The next day would be our first sail. It was, wow. We really had an equation to figure out how much we don't know. As we took that canoe out, it was launched on the sacred beach at Kualoa in Kaneohe Bay. So we take the canoe out, and we got all these lines running around. I don't even know the names of lines. So off we go with these two big sails. We open them up. We catch the wind. Off we go. There were like 35 people on the canoe. It was so balanced so poorly that the steering sweeps we had both broke. And then we went aground on a sandbar because the canoe was so heavy with other people. We run onto the sandbar. Herb Connie's the captain. He tells everybody, get off the canoe. So we all jumped on the sandbar. We could stand up. But we forgot to not close the sails.
Oh.
So the canoe lifted up. It started to sail by itself with only one person on board, the captain, Herb. And then we're all kind of chasing the canoe in the sandbar, and a few got on board, but it kind of left a wake of like maybe 25 people on the sandbar, and I was going, wow, this is going to be a rough one. And so anyway, we turned the canoe around, we sailed back to the beach, and we just still didn't know what to do with how to close the sails. True story. And I can say this because before Herb passed away, he told me publicly on camera this story about sailing back to Kualoa. It's a white sand beach, but the sails are full, and we don't have any brakes. You can't step on the brakes. So we didn't know how to close the sails. I'm looking for an anchor, and I'm like really young, and there was no anchor. So we go crashing into the beach. Herb tries to run to the front to try to do something. The canoe weighs 25,000 pounds. Hits the beach. He goes launched off the bow of the canoe, face first into the sand. I thought he died. And so I run over there, and he's dusting the face off his sand, and then there was this miracle, this princess, and it's an actual princess, a Hawaiian princess. Her name is Abigail Kawananakoa, who Herb talks about looking up, and he saw this. He thought he had died and went to heaven because this lady, beautifully dressed and silhouetted with the light of the sun, and she was standing right up in front of him. He thought she was an angel or something. And he told me this story. I can say this because he did it publicly, but then she goes, hey, I want to see you in my office tomorrow. But what happened was she wrote him a personal check. Would be the largest donation to make sure that Herb found Tahiti. So you sort of have this community come behind an idea. Thousands of people. We took it around the state in 1975. There would be elders that sit on the lava rock at Honolulu. They wouldn't touch the canoe, too sacred, but they stay there all day. People kept feeding this canoe with food, and it started to galvanize a community. What we needed was an idea and a symbol of the idea for us to come together and unify. That was key. For us to come to unify, and together we can change the world. That's why the 50 ulu trees should be an infinite amount of ulu trees around the world. It's a powerful idea. And so we started to train, but we did not know what we were doing. And the last piece I'll talk about, Hokulea, it needed to go to 1976, but who's going to navigate this canoe? You know your campus? I look at the boundaries of your campus. I bet it's the same size as the island called Satawal in Micronesia. There are no navigators in Polynesia anymore. There's a handful in Micronesia, the masters. And I was told at the time, that, and I know there are more, but there were 6 of them. And Mao, Piailug, from the island of Satawal, would be the youngest of the 6. It's a long story about how Herb actually got him to come, but Satawal is a school. How old is Kaimaki Intermediate?
Great question.
Okay, that's research, right?
Yeah.
South the Wall is 4,000 years old.
Oh wow.
The school is called Woriang. It's the top navigation school in the world. The island is probably could fit in Kaimiki Elementary's total campus. I mean Kaimiki Intermediate, sorry.
Yeah.
The island is a mile long, like less than a half mile wide, and it has only 8 feet off the ground, no lagoon. So it was left alone by the Spanish and the Germans and the Japanese and the Americans because there was no military value. But the school never stopped. So Mao came and he did 2 massive miracles. He jumped on Hokulea and left May 1st, 1976, and he found Tahiti.
Oh wow.
Okay, guys, go down the beach, right there down by Manulua. Go look south.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that you can see Tahiti. Look at the left side of Tahiti and draw an imaginary line, and draw another line to the right side. That target is less than 1 degree. 1 degree. And then go navigate there and find it over 2,500 miles using the stars. And he did. Changed the world. 17,000 Tahitians, they're half the population. This canoe is theirs. So they have their language and their oration with no canoe. Hokulea came there. It started to link family. This is our ancestral family. We pay respect to this family. So, and to just finish this long-winded introduction, Mao was a navigator that brought the Pacific Island nations together. Unity, crucial to do anything of significance that has a scale of change. But the other thing he did is because we asked him. He came back and trained us for 25 years. So I lived with him for 28 months in immersion ocean education. We trained every day for 28 months. And so I would navigate to Tahiti in 1980. He was on board to make sure we didn't kill ourselves. And it took me 34 days to get there. But before he died, he made me promise that we don't let the navigation or the voyaging go extinct.
Mm-hmm.
The only way, so my last time that I saw him, I was on his island. His island's very, very remote, very hard to get there. There's no airport, there's no electricity on it. And they lived there 4,000 years. Think about what it took to be innovative with change on an island that small for 4,000 years. These are great navigators. But the day that I would see him for the last time, he just said, "Don't worry, Nainoa." He said, "You will always see me. If you see the seabird on the ocean, that's me. If you see the lightning in the ocean, that's me. If you see the wave, that's me. If you see the star, that's me." He says, "I will always be there as long as you sail." And that's what he was trying to say. If you sail, it won't go extinct. He won't go extinct. So I know the power of the teacher. I know the importance of schools. The greatest school on the earth in navigation is the size of your campus. And so I'm honored to be here at this conference that knows what it needs to do, but needs to figure out the sail plan, how to get there. And we're all with you, with everything that you do in communities, you do in the environment that support the powerful institutions that connect you folks. I mean, tell me, whose idea was it to plant the ulu trees?
I think it was Miss Lambs or Mr.
How do you feel about that? Is it a good idea?
We think it's a good idea for the ecosystems because that's what we are learning now,
Mm-hmm.
and we could use that to make food since we have it in the garden, since we've been having food like growing a lot, so having more vegetables, which like the ulu tree or breadfruit, will give us nutrition like how they would maybe use in old Hawaii.
I also think it would help just the atmosphere of everything in the world.
There's a wild statistic out there. If for some reason every ship and every airplane that brought cargo for our sustainability, we're talking about sustainability, on the island of Oahu, if it stopped, immediately just stopped, that the guesses would have 4 days of food for the total population of nearly 900,000, more than that. So when that happens, I'm gonna come to Kaimiki, see you guys here. Tell me about ecological systems. The reason why I raise that is because I don't think we can protect what we don't understand. What we need to understand is this amazing, incredible miracle in the ocean of space, the island. Mao learned how to live on an island the size of your campus for 4,000 years. Your people did. We need to figure out humanity, how you can live on the only island we have in space. It's called Island Earth. And what I think we need to do is understand the systems, and we need schools to teach the systems. Mm-hmm. That whole discipline of systems learning and systems application. That's what I believe. That's why you are in 7th grade.
Yes.
And you're learning the systems already.
Mm-hmm.
I never had that opportunity. I think you guys are awesome. You're in an awesome school.
Yeah.
You guys have some questions now? You have some questions you want to ask Nainoa?
I have one question. How old were you, and like how were you introduced to the water? Like what made that spark in you?
Oh man,
Like super
that is
interesting.
such a good
Just-
question. My best teacher is my father.
Mhm.
He was just my hero. He was everything. He fought for what was right. He was born and raised here, and he went to school here. He played a football game in Maui. He was on the football team when he was a junior. The day before that Pearl Harbor was bombed.
Oh. Do you know how old he was?
He must have been 16,
Mm-hmm.
15 or 16. The military gave them machine guns, the football team, to go on the beaches because they thought the Japanese were going to invade because they're so vulnerable. And they didn't know how to even operate them. But when he got home, and my father don't talk about stories of war. But the reason why I'm going to say the story, he is my most important teacher, but he was not the one that took me to the ocean. When he got home, he was too young to enter the war. But his father said to him, he said, "You need to go fight for your dirt, Hawaii." And he said, "If you make shame," it was a chronic disease in Native Hawaiians. "If you make shame, don't come home." My father, and he don't talk about his stories. His friend from Oklahoma would tell me he was with him in war, and he falsified his birth certificate, went to Washington State, enlisted in the Army, and they thought he was Native American, so they made him first scout. And then he landed on the LSTs in the blood-soaked beaches of Normandy. D-Day.
Mm-hmm.
And his friends next to him would die. And for a war nobody really understood. And he'd fight 400 miles as first scout. You know, those Native Americans had made him first scout. And they last, on average, 2 minutes per battle. And he fought 400 miles across French soil and a mile from the German border in green fatigues and white snow. A German sniper shot him in the head. And makes a long story, but he ended up in a New York hospital. They bandaged the 2 eyes for, the bullet went to his left side. It took out his left eye.
Oh, wow.
And it exited his whole nose. So they bandaged the 2 eyes for 2 years, and my father doesn't talk about war. It's his friend from Oklahoma that I used to badger him. But he starts talking about the bandage. He talks about blindness. He talks about the darkness. In the darkness, what do you choose to do? He chose to dream. And in the blackness of the bandage is where he decided to do two things that would navigate his whole life. Google him. His name is Myron D. Thompson. He made two commitments. Come home and take care of kids, poor kids, that need it the most, that our society serves the least. The poor kids, it's about equality. But the decision, so that's the dream, that's the pathway. But what's your plan to accomplish that? His surgeon went to Colby College in Maine and got him into school on a scholarship. So he stayed after the hospital, went to school, and said, I'm not going to come home until I'm through my school. It was in social work. But Google him. But he's my hero. But my ocean teacher, my most important teacher about the ocean was, I'm born and raised on my grandfather's dairy farm. I don't know what Costco's or Safeway. There was no stores in New Valley. There was one meat market in Kuli'o, and Aina had a few shops, but there was barely a road to Hanauma Bay. It was a very different time. So, what you guys are doing with the ulu trees, that's what we did. We planted mangoes, and but my grandfather owned a dairy, and we milked cows twice a day, and they would cook the milk, and then someone would have, because there's no supermarkets, they bottled it in glass bottles, and then they delivered it. The delivery man is my teacher. He was a fisherman, and he was taught by the top fishermen before him, a guy by the name of Ayu from Waianae. So he knew Maunalua Bay, right outside here, really well. And so I don't know what the gravity was pulling me to the ocean. My mom was like the world's great ecologist, and she said, protect all life on Earth. And so we were in the forest back then, because it was a forest in New Valley. But my mom was terrified of the ocean, and my dad was too busy saving kids. And Yoshi was the delivery man. So he would get in his old beat-up truck at 10:30 at night and put the bottles of milk on the doorsteps of all the houses. And then he'd come home in the morning. But Yoshi did two things. One is my mom and dad, him and his wife Miyoko, were the ones that would take care of us when they had to go someplace, and we had to go with somebody. They trusted them. And he had an old wooden house, smaller than maybe the size of this room. The whole house, wooden, on the dairy. And he, when you walked in the door, everything was Japanese, because he's Nisei, second generation to Hawaii. His father was the first immigrant. He was born in Hawaii. You'd sit on the floor on futons on a low table. All the decorations were all Japanese. The kitchen smelled of the way they fry their fish. And we took a bath in a cement fudo. Do you know what a fudo is?
The
No.
bathtubs on the floor.
Yeah. And then we heated it with kiabi wood.
Mm.
And so everything was about respect of that Japanese culture, his ancestry, his heritage. Everything in that room was a school. So he doesn't forget where his ancestors come from. But when you step outside, with him, everything was Hawaiian.
Mm.
He would talk about the menehune that he would see on the coral roads, delivering them out. He'd talk about the blue spirits that come down the mountains of Kulepel And he talked about everything outside in nature had a Hawaiian name, not a Japanese name, not an English name, Hawaiian. And so these two worlds were two schools for Yoshi, but his love was the ocean. So he gave me the most important gift that I think anybody gave me, was a piece of bamboo, maybe as long as that rod right there, a fishing pole. And so I was way younger than you guys. I mean, I was about maybe 5 or 6. And we would go into the ocean and we would fish. That was my first love, was fishing. And Mauna Bay was so full of life that we could catch everything in the water. You could work water up to your knees, anything you wanted, even lobsters and squids and everything. And so they would only fish to serve the community.
Mm.
They never sold a thing. And so I grew up in the life of the oceans, and I will say that my great regrets that we did not have the school in place. Mauna Bay should have been a school of restoration of the oceans, but it wasn't. It's starting to now. My great regret in my life was watching us kill that ocean, and I didn't do anything about it. Now we're restoring it because nature has incredible power. You know, the COVID-19, when everything was shut down, nobody was flying airplanes, nobody could go outside, it was locked down, so we left nature alone. The information of restoration of nature is inspiring, it's powerful. What we got to do is leave it alone, and it'll figure it out itself. But that was the time when Yoshi, that little fishing pole, took me to the ocean, and it made me understand fully and clear, this is where I want to be.
Mm.
And so Yoshi Kumano is like my number one teacher of the oceans because he was the first.
Mm-hmm.
Good question.
I have another question. It's about the Hokulea. How has Hokulea and the PBS helped all of us to respect and revere our oceanic worlds?
Read the question again, please.
How has Hokulea and the PBS helped all of us to respect and revere our oceanic worlds?
Yeah. I would go back to Mao. Remember, we didn't know anything. So I think part of the answer was the emergence of certain values that came from sailing this town. The ocean is everything. It steals your emotions. You can be in the most tranquil, calm, flat, clear, mirror-like oceans and be the most peaceful place on earth. And then you can be in the rage of the storm. Where it's and so for me, the ocean is like my largest school. But to be able to learn those values, it had to be taught. And so I go back to Mao. When Mao came to train us for 25 years, we didn't know anything. He could barely speak English, and we could not speak Micronesian. So the communication system was going with him on the ocean, on Hokulea, sailing with him, and just watching him. So let me give you a typical day, a 24-hour day with Mao. He's up for 21 to 22 hours a day. Because one of the issues are in navigation, you only know where you are by memorizing where you come from. If you're caught in the storm, it blows you off course, and you don't know where you went, and the storm clears and the stars come back out, it's not going to tell you where you are. So you need to memorize everything, and then you need to make good choices and decisions. So average day, he's up 21, 22 hours because the only way you can know you are is by memorizing where you come from. Therefore, you got to watch nature, and you got to watch it. So if you're sleeping, you don't know where that canoe's going. So sorry, but give up rest. And then you have to be really conscious to make decisions when you're most tired. So we were like shocked. We watch him, he'd be on his feet because he feels the wave through one foot as it goes from one wave to the wave goes from one foot to the other. And so we did what he did. We would like try to stand like him. We'd kind of look at what is he looking at, and then we slowly would ask questions. And but it's interesting, on this 24-hour day, Mao, to do his job to get to Tahiti, would make 5,000 observations of nature. That is the most powerful way to explore, is to watch. 5,000 observations of nature to make 500 choices. Turn left, turn right, balance the canoe, move that water bottle, trim. 500 choices a day to make two decisions, sunrise and sunset. is a time when you take all that information that nature gave you and you sift it down at a 12-hour cycle from sunrise to sunset to sunrise. And you ask two questions. Where am I? And where am I going? And that, the reason why I bring up that answer to your question is because when we kind of do the mathematics, there's 8 billion of us on the earth. We're all making 500 choices a day. That's 4 trillion human choices, 4 trillion every day. What if our schools are engineered to help young people make better choices than my generation did? What if we did that?
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd change anything,
Mm-hmm.
anything. If our schools helped us, give us the tools for better choices. So our school is based on nature. Our school is based on teachers, and our school is based on values. To your question, the issue about that's where we learned respect. That's where we learned the value of teamwork. That's where we learned the issue of care. At Hokulea is your home. You take care of it, it'll take care of you. Mao is the teacher. Listen to him. Listen to him, and he'll get you to the island you seek. So all these things about how we needed to behave was about recognition and connection to nature, but it was also the issue of what is the culture of the humanity of the canoe. And to me, on the canoe, the number one value is care. Take care of each other. What if schools did that? To allow us to make better decisions. What is the culture of humanity today? Is it caring? What is it? But what if schools could help us? With the power of communication technology, you can talk to anybody in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can connect, right? So we can break down all the kinds of barriers of national walls and the fears of war and these things. If young people came together and said, we're going to have a better, peaceful future, but the tools you have today, we didn't have them. And just imagine that 20 years from now. What's the tools going to look like? Re-engineering schools to get us to do what Mao did, I think will help engineer a more peaceful world. We're still learning, about that question. Yeah. Is this working or what? Is this working or what?
Great, yeah. Okay, so
How might the how might the DOE, UH, and higher education more broadly partner with PVS to transcend barriers to college success and Indigenous students?
Yikes. What did you guys have for breakfast today when you wrote these questions?
you said it well.
I think it's about believing something. If the DOE, the university systems, and PBS are going to work together, we need to believe in something. And we need to believe that coming together, we can. Well, the first question is does education need to change? And you got to start there. And, I'm not trying to make everybody angry at me, but education has the duty to not be behind the path of humanity. It needs to be in front of it. It needs to forecast. It needs to predict. It needs to know when the 7th grader goes to 20 years from now to the Voyager School at Carnegie Intermediate 20 years from now in August of some year and know that the schools have evolved to be able to meet and give young people the pathway and the beliefs that they can shape their world and give them the tools to get there. I think this school is well on the track. I mean, I just been here an hour. But I'm so sorry that you guys got to sit with me, a boring old guy, while they are planting all these amazing trees. And so I'm so sorry.
No, this is
very
better.
But I think
This is more interesting.
I think it depends on whether people believe that there needs to be change. Then two is to have a vision for that change, and to determine common values that we'll agree on. Education institutions, the voyage in society, and then I think it needs to have a commitment to community. That education does not begin and end in the classroom. It's in families. It's in our backyards. It's on the coral reefs. It's throughout the whole system of life on these Hawaiian Islands. And why is that important? It's because if we do that, then Hawaii becomes a beacon of light for the world that believes it's in the storm right now. In the black of the storm of how we see ourselves post-COVID, someone needs a flashlight out. And Hawaii could do that. So if the educational systems came together and believed that, and that knew that unity was vital to come together, and then and design the values, committed to communities and their families, that they're going to secure a better life for our children, and then said, okay, the hard part, what's the sail plan? If you came together and started engineering the pathway to get to that vision that you speak about, which is, it's your right, to do that. It's almost your duty to force it, and because it's your right for your future. And that sail plan is crucial. It's like how we want to get to Tahiti. We have to have a plan to get there. You just can't just go. You have to know a plan, and then the hard part, training. You need to go and get educated to be able to execute that sail plan and get trained in whatever you're going to do. So what I think the Voyager School at Kaimaki is exactly what we need to be in all schools, where to be a navigator, you don't have to be on a voyaging canoe.
Mm-hmm.
You could be, Satawal, the island, is having a real problem. It's called sea level rising. So when they forecast out, they're only 8 feet above the water at the highest point, but you subtract 3 feet by the end of the century, and you bring more storms. They're looking at leaving Satawal, leaving the school, and the elders are saying, no way, I'm going to die here. Mm-hmm. But what if Kaimaki, intermediate voyagers, figured out the problem is the salt water is intruding into the breadfruit forest, into the taro fields. What if Kaimaki could figure out a more salt-tolerant breadfruit tree and gave it as a gift to Satawal, so they would have food? Wow. Mm-hmm. And if a school said, okay, let's build a sail plan to get there, and go train to do it, and give that to Satawal, that's the flashlight out of the storm. So I think it's these steps, but what you're asking is going to take an enormous amount of courage. Mm-hmm. Once you're trained, are you willing to really let go of the lines and let go of who you used to be to adopt something that's new and different and change? It's really hard for people to do that. It takes courage. And so on our side, we let go of the lines to go around the world. That's a scary thing to do. But we go because we know that the purpose to go, to engage the earth, you can't protect what you don't understand. And you won't protect it if you don't care. Mm-hmm. And you can't do it by yourself. You have to engage the whole humanity and the planet. That's why your question is a really deep one, where if we came together in Hawaii in the educational institutions around a destination and figure out the sail plan and train for it, then Hawaii has the greatest gift for the earth. And that would be a pathway to peace. School's got to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
You good? You want to ask more questions?
Sounds good.
I have one more.
Because that was a powerful ending, so it's not
Do you know for your training to voyage on the Mokulea, what's like the process of doing?
Can you repeat the question? I think it's going to come through.
Oh, what is like the process of training for sailing on Hokulea?
One is don't get old like me. But age is like gravity and time. You can't do anything about it. But when we were trying to figure it out, training was everything to get prepared. So the obvious was, we created tests for ourselves. You got to swim the mile under an hour. You got to run the mile. You got to do balance exercise. You got to do strength exercise. We did all that physical stuff. Then we said, okay, you got to be medically safe to be on a canoe, and then, but for the navigation, it was enormous amount of study. At a time when, think back when we were training, there was no personal computers. There was no iPad.
No internet.
No internet. And so therefore there was no stellarium where you can go study the stars. You had to go out in nature and do it. The only artificial tool we had to train was the Bishop Museum Planetarium. Hundreds and hundreds of hours. Will Koselka is another great voyager and teacher. He was from Boston. He was a geologist at the University of Hawaii, but he was a planetarium lecturer. And so when we were fumbling around trying to learn the heavens, I made a big mistake about where the moon rises and the sun rises. I thought they rise in the same place. Wrong. And so we did a voyage, and the moon came up, not the same place. The full moon came up in the sunset, but in different parts of the star compass. I didn't know which one to use. And so when I got back home from this voyage of ignorance, I called Will Koselka up at 6:30 in the morning, woke him up. And I was a really super shy guy, and I said, I don't know what's wrong with the moon. It came up the wrong place. And he's the guy that said, who is this idiot on the phone? And he says, well, why don't you come down to the Bishop Museum Planetarium? I knew he was a lecturer there. Because I called, he said, call this guy up. He gave me his number. So I came down, and in 5 minutes, he showed me how the science of how the system of the Earth goes around the sun and the moon goes around the Earth. And so it just made total sense. So I didn't want to bother him anymore, so I was going to leave. And one of the other great gifts, like the bamboo pole, was when I was walking out the door, he goes, hey, Nainoa, you want to come back? So we spent hundreds of hours in there. And we would take our sleeping bags, and we would bribe the security guards with plate lunches to lock us in the building. And we stayed there all night and just keep the stars just going over our heads thousands of times until you figure it out. But that was part of all the preparation to be able to answer the infinite amount of questions you don't understand. So voyaging on the navigation side is a commitment to learning lifelong. And so because the face of the ocean is infinite, the places are so dynamic, so different. We're going to go to Alaska in 2 months. Currents up there are like crazy. Hypothermia is real, and so it's just committing to the love of learning about the Earth that keeps us going. Did I answer your question? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we're good.
That was good.
We could probably go all day, man. I like it.
Could you?
Upside Tilly Lama. Thank you very much. Good job, you guys. Good listening, good question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you sign this?
Oh yeah, man.
Thank you.
Who's this to?
Mr.
Mr.